This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to Asean in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles and we're coming to you today from Manila and Cambodia. Here's Cristel Ballesteros. Hello, Cristel.
Hello, Alma, and to everyone who's watching for us today. I am Cristel Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
And it is very worrying.
The UN envoy on Myanmar implored the Security Council to take action in the Asian nation's escalating crisis, warning of the risk of civil war and an imminent bloodbath as the junta violently represses pro-democracy protests.
The Philippines on Wednesday has reiterated its call for China to withdraw its militia ships spotted massing in the country's maritime territory of the West Philippine Sea.
An armed woman shot dead at Indonesia's National Police Headquarters was an Islamic State sympathizer, according to authorities, citing social media posts she made shortly before the fatal gun battle.
New York police on Wednesday charged a suspect in the brutal videotape assault of a 65-year-old Filipino-American woman that sparked outrage amid the surge of anti-Asian violence in the United States. Police identified the man as 38-year-old Brandon Elliott, who was released from prison in 2019 on lifetime parole for stabbing his mother to death in front of his 5-year-old sister in 2002.
First, to the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, the UN envoy on Myanmar implored the Security Council to take action in the Asian nation's escalating crisis. They warned of a risk of civil war and an imminent bloodbath as the junta violently represses pro-democracy protests. Barbara Woodward, the UN envoy from Britain, which requested the meeting, told reporters the Security Council was united in its condemnation and was discussing a range of measures at their proposal. Take a look.
Condemnation of what is going on. So, as I say, we'll continue to discuss next steps. We have a range of measures at our disposal, but the main thing is to make sure that we can see the end of violence, the release of those arbitrarily detained, and the restoration of Myanmar on the path back to democracy and stability. Today, we heard from the Special Envoy that there is a significant risk that the situation in Myanmar deteriorates further, with implications for regional and international security. Indeed, we're already seeing spillover into neighbouring countries, with approximately 3,000 civilians fleeing from Myanmar into Thailand this past weekend. The Secretary-General has underlined the need for a unified, resolute and firm international response, and the Council should play its part. We'll continue to closely monitor the situation and work with our colleagues in the Council and regional partners to help end this senseless violence, hold those responsible to account and secure a path back to democracy.
But China, considered Myanmar's main ally, rolled out sanctions. One-sided pressure and calling for sanctions or other coercive measures will only aggravate tension and confrontation and further complicate the situation, which is by no means constructive, according to China's ambassador, Zhang Jun. And he told this during the meeting, according to his statement. The session came after Suu Kyi's legal team earlier Wednesday said the ousted leader appeared to be in good health despite 2 months of detention. Suu Kyi, 75, has not been seen in public since she was deposed. But a member of the legal team, Min So, was summoned to a police station in the capital, Naypyidaw, for a video meeting with her. And Suu Kyi is facing a raft of criminal charges, and conviction could see her barred from office for life. More than 520 people have died in daily demonstrations since the military overthrew elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi on February 1, halting Myanmar's decade-old experiment in democracy.
Still in Myanmar, ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi appears in good health despite 2 months of detention. Her legal team said Wednesday as diplomatic pressure on the military junta ramped up. The 75-year-old Suu Kyi has not been seen in public since she was deposed by the military and detained in the early hours of February 1.
By the appearance on the screen of the video, Aung San Suu Kyi seems to be in good health. She demanded and she asked for private meeting as lawyer and defendants with our defense counsels.
Daily protests demanding the restoration of the elected government have been met with a crackdown that has left more than 520 civilians dead in the weeks since the February 1 coup. The junta's violent response has triggered international condemnation and threats of retaliation from some of Myanmar's myriad ethnic armed groups. A member of Suu Kyi's legal team, Min So, was summoned to a police station in the capital, Naypyidaw, for a video meeting with her on Wednesday. Suu Kyi is facing a raft of criminal charges, and conviction could see her barred for life from political office. Suu Kyi noted that during the meeting, police officers remained at the lawyer's side and guards monitored her at her end. The statement said, adding that the Nobel laureate had asked whether this was lawful.
Meanwhile, Cain Zartue's portrait, flashing the anti-coup three-finger salute, was proudly displayed on her coffin at her funeral. The 26-year-old protester was shot in the head in March and was one of hundreds to lose their lives in protest since a military coup on February 1. Take a look.
An armed woman shot dead at Indonesia's National Police headquarters Wednesday was an Islamic State sympathizer. Authorities said, citing social media posts she made shortly before the fatal gun battle.
Kurang lebih jam 16.30 tadi, ada seorang wanita yang berjalan masuk dari pintu belakang, kemudian yang bersangkutan kemudian mengarah ke pos gerbang utama yang ada di yang bersangkutan kembali dan kemudian melakukan penyerangan terhadap anggota yang ada di pos jaga dengan melakukan penembakan sebanyak 6 kali. Yang bersangkutan ini adalah tersangka atau pelaku lone wolf yang berideologi radikal ISIS yang dibuktikan dengan postingan yang bersangkutan di sosial media.
On Wednesday afternoon, the 25-year-old woman wearing a niqab face veil and a long black gown entered the police complex in downtown Jakarta and opened fire on officers at the entrance, authorities said. Images broadcast by local media showed the woman fall to the ground as shots rang out before lying motionless as police surrounded her body. Authorities said they had identified the woman as a university dropout who had left a suicide note at her family home in Jakarta, which they raided after the shootout. She had posted the IS flag and writings about becoming a martyr on a recently created Instagram account. The attack came after the arrest of dozens of suspected militants in recent months by Indonesia's counter-terror squad. Indonesia's security forces regularly arrest suspected militants, and attacks have often been low-level and have targeted domestic security forces. Indonesia has been on high alert in recent days after 2 suicide bombers, alleged members of a pro-ISIS extremist group, blew themselves up at a church in Makassar City on Sulawesi Island, wounding about 20 people. Police outposts have been frequent targets of Indonesian extremists in the past.
The Philippines today has reiterated its call for China to withdraw its militia ships spotted missing in the country's maritime territory off the West Philippine Sea. The National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, or NTF-WPS, issued this call as the Chinese Maritime Militia, or CMM, have continued with their unlawful swarming presence, quote, and have appeared off the Kalayaan Island Group, or KIG, instead of complying with the country's demand that they withdraw their ships off Julian Felipe Reef. NTF-WPS stands by its observation that these so-called fishing vessels are maritime militia. Their buildup and massing formation from Julian Felipe Reef to other areas of the Kalayaan Island Group is hazardous to navigation and safety of life at sea, it added. NTF-WPS added that it's possible that Chinese ships might be doing something illegal at night and that their continued presence may cause irreparable damage to the marine environment due to marine pollution and the destruction of coral reefs. It said it continues to assert Philippine sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction over the Kalayaan Island Group and the West Philippine Sea, and expressed its concern over the illegal Chinese maritime presence. Neither the Philippines nor the international community will ever accept China's assertion of its so-called indisputable integrated sovereignty over almost all of the South China Sea, part of which is the West Philippine Sea, it added. Julian Felipe Reef is a large boomerang-shaped shallow coral reef at the northeast of Pagkakaisa Banks and Reefs, or Union Reefs, located approximately 175 nautical miles west of Bataraza, Palawan.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP, on Wednesday said the number of Chinese vessels spotted off Julian Felipe Reef in the West Philippine Sea decreased based on its latest air patrol on Tuesday. AFP spokesperson Marine Major General Edgardo Arevalo said in a statement that there was a reduction in the number of vessels at the Julian Felipe Reef, which is part of the Pagkakaisa Reef. In the last aerial sovereignty patrol on 30 March 2021, 44 Chinese vessels were spotted there. But we cannot readily say if the 92 vessels sighted in Jigwa Reef and 84 in Gavin Reef are part of the original 183 first reported by the AFP. He added that the overflights will continue despite the radio challenge made against the patrolling Philippine aircraft by Chinese forces in the area. Arevalo said, it's not the first time and those challenges have been customary. Hence, our reply is likewise customary, that we are conducting routine maritime patrol over our EEZ or exclusive economic zone. He added that it is a constitutional mandate of the AFP to protect and defend the country's sovereignty and territorial rights. He also said the AFP will conduct air and naval patrols aside from other relevant measures to ensure maritime situational awareness.
To Indonesia now, where firefighters on Wednesday extinguished a large blaze at one of the country's biggest oil refineries that had been burning for more than 2 days after an explosion. Crews blasted fire-suppressing foam to quench the flames at 2 storage tankers after the inferno seriously injured at least 6 people early on Monday. Thick plumes of black smoke shot into the sky at the Balongan refinery in West Java, owned by state oil company Pertamina. The firm said the huge fire was eventually put out on Wednesday afternoon. About 1,000 locals have been evacuated from the area. The cause of the fire was not clear, but the company said the blaze began during a lightning storm. The local disaster agency said 1 person had died from a heart attack after the explosion. 6 severely wounded people have been hospitalized in the capital, Jakarta, about 200 kilometers from the sprawling plant, which opened in the mid-1990s and can refine about 125,000 barrels of oil a day. At least 30 others sustained minor injuries.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Higit sa boses, puso ang sandata ko sa pagkanta.
You surprised all of us. Hindi ko in-expect yun.
Upang mga awit ko'y inyong madama.
Ang kukumpleto sa line-up ng second semi-finals, Carl Aris Tanueco!
Ako po si Carl Aris Tanueco, ang pambato ng Angela City Company.
The cockpit voice recorder from a crashed Indonesian jet has been retrieved in good condition, officials said Wednesday, more than 2 months after the airliner plunged into the sea, killing all 62 passengers and crew. The CVR records flight crew conversations and could offer critical clues about why the Sriwijaya Air Boeing 737-500 dived around 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet into waters off Jakarta just minutes after takeoff on January 9.
Namun setelah 1,5 bulan pencarian dengan menggunakan penyelam dengan segala peralatan yang kita punya tidak membuahkan hasil, dan kami istirahat 1 minggu terus kita mengevaluasi kira-kira metode apa lagi yang bisa kita gunakan di dalam pencarian black box ini. Terus kemudian karena memang area di situ banyak lumpurnya, dengan kapal TSAD ini kita melakukan pencarian yaitu dengan ada penyedot lumpur kerjanya seperti vacuum cleaner. Kita menyedot sampai kedalaman 1 meter di area 90 kali 90. Terus
cockpit voice recorder dari puing-puing. Apa yang dilakukan tidak mudah karena dimulai atau didahului dengan kita mencari secara teknis di mana penyelam itu ke dasar laut. Tetapi memang banyak sekali puing-puing sehingga metodenya dirubah, dan nanti KNKT sudah menemukan banyak hal dari flight data recorder. Tetapi flight data recorder itu akan paripurna apabila dilakukan satu penggabungan apa yang terjadi di kokpit, yaitu pembicaraan antara pilot dan co-pilot.
Cockpit voice and flight data recorders are known as black boxes and help explain nearly 90% of all crashes. According to aviation experts, the voice device was found Tuesday evening on the last day of an operation that used dredging equipment to calm the muddy seabed after the dive search failed to locate it. A preliminary report last month into the crash said crews on previous flights had described the jet's throttle system as unserviceable, and that it had been repaired several times before its fatal final flight. The report said a catastrophic throttle malfunction and possible human error were among the factors being considered. But investigators had said it was too early to pinpoint a cause. The 737 had sharply deviated from its intended course just before its plunge. Despite appeals from air traffic controllers, the crew, including an experienced captain, did not respond to questions about the sudden change of direction. The 26-year-old plane was flown by US-based Continental Airlines and United Airlines before it was purchased by Sriwijaya, which flies to destinations in Indonesia and across Southeast Asia.
And going back to the crisis in Myanmar, the Philippines also voiced dismay at reports of excessive force by the Myanmar military against unarmed protesters on Armed Forces Day, which killed over 100 people, but will not intervene in the ongoing crisis. Manila issued a statement through the Department of Foreign Affairs, or the DFA, amid reports that 107 people, including children, were killed by security forces across Myanmar on Saturday during a crackdown. The Philippine government reiterated its call for security forces in Myanmar to exercise restraint and desist from resorting to disproportionate force against unarmed citizens. Over 100 people, including some children, were reportedly killed in a lethal crackdown on pro-democracy protesters during Myanmar's Armed Forces Day, the worst day of the violence since the military junta seized power. According to news agency Myanmar Now, 11 children were among the casualties, and that those under 16 years old were not even anti-regime protesters, but rather were shot indiscriminately in and around their homes. As of March 29, the news agency said about 400. That was March 29, but now there are more than 520 killed by the junta's armed forces since February 1, at least 26 of whom are children. And joining me now is from the island nation of Maldives. Here's Steffi Dewan. Steffi.
Hello, Alma.
Hello, Steffi. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Yes, Health Minister Ahmad Nassim has stated that the Maldives had a backlog of around 3,000 COVID-19 tests pending. The minister was speaking in the parliament today when he stated that a large number of tests were still pending due to difficulties in testing capacity. During the ministerial questioning session in the parliament today, the minister said that due to an increase in COVID-19 cases in different regions of the nation, sample collection was also increased according to the minister. Due to this, 3,000 tests remained pending, and the minister emphasized that discussion had been held to resolve the issue. Many islands and local authorities have expressed concern over the delays faced in testing. Lawmakers also questioning the minister over the testing arrangements were not made in different regions of the Maldives and more risk of a wider outbreak. Due to the confirmation of cases from multiple islands such as the Ungguparu cluster. But the minister in response said that such arrangements would be made in Ungguparu Regional Hospital within the 2 months, and the government was continuously working to resolve the delays in testing. And that's my quick update from Maldives. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Steffi. Looking forward to more updates there in Maldives. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much, Alma. Likewise. Reporting live from Maldives, this is Steffi Dihuan, and we live in interesting times.
Going back in Myanmar, the U.S. State Department has ordered the departure of non-essential diplomats from Myanmar. It said in a statement Tuesday amid a crackdown on protesters that has killed hundreds since the country's military coup began. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned the abuses in Myanmar.
Nonviolent protesters in Burma have been killed, beaten, imprisoned, including on Saturday, when more than 100 people were reportedly killed by the military. Many of those killed were protesting on Armed Forces Day, others simply bystanders. The military said in advance that they might shoot protesters in the back or the head, and they've made good on that threat. Among those reportedly killed, 4 children, the youngest, a 5-year-old boy. We condemn these and other widespread violations by Burma's security forces in the strongest terms. And we continue to call on the military regime to release all those people who've been unjustly detained, stop its attacks on civil society members, journalists, labor unionists, halt the killings by its security forces, and return to power the democratically elected government.
In mid-February, the State Department authorized a voluntary departure of non-emergency U.S. government employees and their family members. The statement said, adding that the department had updated the status to ordered departure. A spokesperson said, the Department of State made the decision to authorize order departure from Burma because the safety and security of us or of U.S. government personnel and their dependents, as well as private U.S. citizens, is the department's highest priority. The civilian death toll from the military's crackdown has now passed 520, with world powers ramping up their condemnation of the military's campaign in the wake of its February 1 coup. The ordered departure status will be reviewed in 30-day increments. The US, Britain, and the EU have all imposed sanctions in response to the coup and crackdown. But so far, diplomatic pressure has not persuaded the generals to ease off.
In a related news, Japan has halted new aid to Myanmar in response to the coup. That is according to the country's foreign minister, but is stopping short of sanctions imposed by some nations on military and police commanders. Japan is a top aid donor to Myanmar, and Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi said the suspension of assistance would send a clear message. The U.S., Britain, and the European Union have already announced a range of sanctions targeting top police and military commanders linked to the coup, as well as military-owned companies. But Japan, which has strong economic ties with Myanmar and long-standing relations with its military, has opted not to take more directly punitive measures. Japan has criticized the coup in Myanmar and called for the restoration of democracy, but it has faced calls to stake out a stronger position on the crisis. Tokyo has traditionally maintained cordial ties with Myanmar, while also supporting the cause of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who briefly lived in Kyoto as a young researcher. Thousands of Japanese nationals and several hundred Japanese companies are believed to be in Myanmar, and Japan is reportedly the fifth largest foreign investor in the country.
German company that supplies products to make Myanmar banknotes has suspended deliveries in response to growing violence following the military coup to oust civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, it said Wednesday. GSEC and Devrient said in a statement that this is a reaction to the ongoing violent clashes between the military and the civilian population. The company had already restricted its supply of raw materials, supplies, and system components for the production of banknotes in recent weeks. The United States, Britain, and the European Union have announced a range of sanctions targeting top police and military commanders linked to the coup, as well as military-owned companies.
Back to the pandemic situation. Here in the Philippines, food delivery is allowed 24/7 in areas under Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ. That is according to Malacanang, and they clarified this yesterday. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this reminder after a video of a Grab food rider being barred from delivering lugao or hot rice porridge went viral. A video which has been circulating online has come to our attention. Lugao, or any food item for that matter, is considered an essential good, according to Secretary Roque in a statement. Secretary Roque on March 27 said delivery and courier services transporting essential goods will be allowed during the ECQ. The delivery of food items must remain unhampered 24/7, and he said, let's not stop them at checkpoints.
Five pro-democracy activists in Thailand were charged Wednesday with the criminal offense of attempting to harm the Queen over an encounter with the royal motorcade during a protest last year. If convicted, the group could face a minimum of 16 years jail or life in prison under a law that has not been used for decades and punishes any act of violence against the Queen or her liberty. and if the court finds they put the Queen's life in danger, they could be sentenced to death. They were charged over an incident during a protest in October last year when thousands marched from the Democracy Monument to the Government House in Bangkok. A motorcade ferrying Queen Sutida and Prince Dipangkorn Resmihoti passed through the protest zone, and some protesters crowded around the vehicle, raising the three-fingered salute of defiance adopted from the Hunger Games books and films. Such an over-challenge of the monarchy is unprecedented in Thailand, where a draconian defamation law has been used to shield the royal family from criticism. The court granted the 5 protesters bail after they were formally charged on Wednesday, Thai lawyers for human rights told AFP. They had to post between 200,000 baht to 300,000 baht, or $6,400 to $9,600. One of the accused, Bunkenon Francis Pautong, 21, said he had no intention of harming the Queen. He told reporters it had been a wretched and excruciating 5 months in legal limbo. The pro-democracy protest in Bangkok kicked off last July and called for the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's government and a rewrite of the military-scripted constitution. But the most controversial demands have been for reforms to the monarchy, including the abolition of lèse-majesté, the royal defamation law. Close to 20 pro-democracy protesters and student leaders are on remand in prison while fighting charges on lèse-majesté, sedition, and other offenses.
In other news, New York police on Wednesday charged a suspect in a brutal videotape assault of a 65-year-old Phil-American woman that sparked outrage amid a surge of anti-Asian violence in the U.S. Police identified the man as 38-year-old Brandon Elliott, who was released from prison in 2019 on lifetime parole for stabbing his own mother to death in front of his 5-year-old sister in 2002. A spokesperson said NYPD officers arrested Elliott late on Tuesday at a hotel in Times Square near the scene of the crime that is housing homeless people during the coronavirus pandemic. He was charged with felony assault as a hate crime in the early hours of Wednesday, according to police in a statement. The attack, which took place on a sidewalk in broad daylight in Midtown Manhattan on Monday, was caught on CCTV footage from inside an adjacent building and showed bystanders seemingly looking on without intervening. In the video posted online by police, the subject can be seen walking up to the woman and kicking her in the stomach, knocking her to the ground. The video also shows a man who appears to be a delivery worker watching the attack unfold from inside the building. He is then joined by 2 other men, one of whom closes the door rather than coming to the woman's aid as the assailant walks away. The victim, whose identity has not been released, was hospitalized with multiple injuries, including a fractured pelvis. She has since left the hospital, according to local media. Manhattan prosecutor Cyrus Vance said Elliott faces up to 25 years in prison if convicted. The violence and apparent reluctance of witnesses to help the victim sparked also an uproar. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said the attack was horrifying and repugnant, adding that anti-Asian violence was becoming an epidemic across the country that must stop now.
kang may pera sa basura, lalo na kung magagawa ang iba't ibang bagay mula sa mga recyclable material na inaakala ng iba na itatapon na. May ilang barangay sa bansa ang nagre-recycle ng basura at makikita ang iba't ibang bagay na gawa sa basura. Mga dekorasyon sa bahay, sa mga proyektong ito, nagiging malinis ang kapaligiran bukod sa mayroon pang pagkakakitaan.
Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion, believes that the only way to balance health and economy amid the global health crisis is through the immunization program. During the Kapihan sa Manila Bay Virtual Forum Wednesday, Concepcion said the back and forth lockdown and reopening of economic activities and staying in the middle of lives and livelihood is extremely difficult for Filipinos.
Because, wearing a face mask, face shields, and social distancing are very important to maintain and contain the infection level. It is not really the solution to our economic problem today. The health problem has to be solved. And the health problem can only be solved with these vaccines arriving. And that's why we took a very proactive stand. And we said, let's be aggressive. Let's be more supportive. I know we've donated so much to the government, especially these larger corporations, on many of their efforts. But let's take a very proactive, aggressive stand on really helping our employees and trying to protect them. So that's all emanated from that. And I'm glad that if not for Secretary Galvez, I don't think we would have had a tripartite agreement. No? The agreement took some time, but then it was crafted very well, which was basically a win-win for all parties concerned, including the AstraZeneca as the pharmaceutical company. So then, fast forward till today, this year, in 2021. The law was created, which protects formally through our law that the indemnification of all parties involved. Now, the challenge here, and people are saying, and I know this event is to discuss the president's statement on the private sector can purchase vaccines at will. We'd love to do it, but no pharmaceutical company will be able to sell you, especially today, because there's just a shortage of supply at this current time. Yes, you can see India is putting a 2-month hold on exports of vaccines. We have spending distributors that are planning to bring vaccines on the third and fourth quarter. Hopefully, that 2-month moratorium on exports will have been done by then. But you can see that every country is fighting for supply, because as we see this infection level rising up, especially in the Philippines and other countries all over the world, this is the only measure we can take right now to protect our people. And as we manage the health situation through the deployment of vaccines, then we can see us being able to at least keep the economy open and running.
He added the private sector has formalized the request to the government to focus half of the vaccine donation to Metro Manila, particularly for micro and small entrepreneurs who are not capable of buying their own vaccines.
In other news, over 200 volcanic earthquakes were monitored at the Taal volcano in 24 hours. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology said that 254 quakes at the volcano, which remains on alert level 2, included 220 episodes of volcanic tremor with durations of 1 to 27 minutes. 33 low-frequency volcanic earthquakes, and 1 volcano tectonic earthquake. A weak emission of steam-laden plumes from fumarolic vents and sulfur dioxide emission was also monitored. According to PHIVOC, sulfur dioxide emission averaged 509 tons yesterday. PHIVOC said temperature highs of 71.8 degrees Celsius and a pH of 1.59 were last measured from the main crater lake, respectively, on March 4 and 12 and the 12th of February this year. PHIVOC said a very slow and steady inflation and expansion of the Taal region since after the January 2020 eruption may indicate increased magmatic activity at shallow depths beneath the edifice. At alert level 2, PHIVOC reminded the public that sudden steam-driven or phreatic explosions, volcanic earthquakes, minor ashfall, and lethal accumulations or expulsions of volcanic gas can occur and threaten areas within and around the island. It reiterated the ban on entry into Taal Volcano Island, Taal's Permanent Danger Zone or PDZ, especially the vicinities of the main crater and the Daang Castilla Fissure, and occupancy and boating on Taal Lake should remain. Meanwhile, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion said the private sector can take another week of ECQ anti-COVID measures for Metro Manila and even neighboring areas to ensure that the initial lockdown will be a success. But he also admitted that it's going to be difficult to balance saving lives and livelihoods. Take a look.
If the infections are not still under control, I wouldn't mind, so we don't waste the 1 week lockdown during Holy Week, which didn't really affect much of the industries because of basically it's a 4-day out of 7 days. No? So if the 1 week will ensure the success of the lockdown, then I would support it.
Yeah, even an extension up to the end of this month?
No, basically for another week now. If you're going to extend it till the 1 month, then that's maybe a different story. No, baka talagang marami dyan na magugutom na. No? So I think we should really look at it unless this pandemic is really totally out of control. No, it's hard to say. No, I mean, but hopefully after this 1 week, if they do extend another 1 week, hopefully this would already start to flatten the curve and start to go down.
You know, the Federation always respects the judgment of the government. So we may have to live with it, but hopefully we can try to see what we can do. In the meantime, because it's very, very difficult for us already. Last year, during the emergence of the pandemic, we were still very hopeful. Even if there's any lockdown, whatever, we were able to, of course, pay also our workers, most of them. But then at this point in time, where the resources are dried up already, and most companies are also in a very difficult position. So this is something that is very, very different from last year. But then again, just as I said, we respect the judgment of the government. We will continue to support the government in whatever is the judgment. But this is our own, regarding this additional 1 week.
Sure. And, I mean, it's up to them. We've already, through the T3 and all of these different interactions with the public sector, we've done it. But let's see, I mean, I'll respect the judgment because at this point in time, the cases are really mounting. This is worse than last year, if you're to ask me, in terms of spread of the virus. I mean, you basically, to me, I'm bothered with it, to some extent. The level of speed of this infection. Could it be because of the variant, or is it because of the negligence of our people not being too complacent? But that was the last year. But this kind of spread is different. We know basically who are many of our friends are dying, are severely ill in the hospitals. My doctors say that it's full. I mean, the impact is different now. No? So I think our medical doctors know better. But of course, the economy cannot anymore take a prolonged lockdown, and many livelihoods are already affected. So this effect of prolonged lockdown can last longer, no, the effects, as what Henry was saying. So it's really a judgment call. No? It's, as a decision maker, it's very hard, no, to make that decision. So you want to save both lives and livelihoods, so you try to stay in the middle to save both. But it's hard to stay in the middle, no?
The national flag carrier, Vietnam Airlines, has rolled out a plan to increase frequency of flights to Japan, the Republic of Korea, and Australia in the next 3 months. The targeted air routes will be Hanoi to Tokyo, Hanoi to Seoul, Hanoi to Sydney, and Ho Chi Minh City to Sydney. The plan will be implemented between April 1 and June 30 this year as part of the effort to boost economic recovery. Specifically, flights from Hanoi to Seoul will depart every Thursday from next month, while flights from Hanoi to Tokyo will depart on April 3, 8, 11, 16, 23, 27, and 29. In the subsequent months, the number of flights to Tokyo will be increased to two per week on Thursday and Saturday. Flights from Hanoi to Sydney will depart on Saturdays, and flights from Ho Chi Minh City to Sydney will be on Thursdays and Sundays. The above flights will be reserved for Vietnamese people who wish to go abroad for studying, working, and visiting their relatives, for repatriation of Vietnamese abroad, and for foreign experts who wish to leave Vietnam or return to the Southeast Asian country. Passengers who wish to return to Vietnam should contact Vietnamese embassies in the host countries to learn about Vietnam's current entry regulations.
Thank you, Crystal, for keeping me company today. Stay safe always.
No worries, Alma. It's always been my pleasure. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nation. And I'm Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your EBC Cambodia Bureau. And we live in interesting times.
We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
Yang hadir untuk tetap menjaga jarak.